It was the kind of summer that carried silence like a secret, hot, slow, and strangely calm. I had just ended a long, bitter relationship, the kind that drains more than it gives. Emotionally spent, I accepted an invitation to stay with my uncle at his countryside home, a quiet retreat tucked between fields and forgotten roads. He was a man of simple rituals: early coffee, long afternoon naps, and jazz music echoing softly through the wooden halls. My uncle, though quiet by nature, had always been the kind of presence that brought comfort. He wasn't married, never had been, but he surrounded himself with a warm familiarity that made solitude feel less lonely. The house had another occupant I hadn't expected, Mira. Introduced as a longtime family friend and housekeeper, she was in her late 20s, graceful with a quiet, magnetic energy. Her smile was kind, but her eyes told stories she never spoke aloud. From the start, there was something about her that made you want to sit down and listen. I often found her tending the garden or organizing books in the study. She moved like she belonged there, yet carried an aura of detachment, as if part of her were always somewhere else. She offered to make tea most afternoons, and I never refused. Our conversations began innocently enough: movies, travel, favorite music, but soon dipped into shared philosophies on love, pain, and resilience. Still, something lingered beneath her words. She'd often pause mid-thought, glance toward the hallway, then offer a hurried smile as if she'd said too much. There were moments, barely perceptible, where the atmosphere in the house shifted. Laughter that abruptly stopped when I entered. A room. The sound of a door gently closing when it shouldn't have been open. Subtle but unmistakable signs. Then came the moment that began to unravel everything. It was a golden afternoon. My uncle had retreated into his room for his usual nap. The house fell into its familiar quiet. I stepped out onto the back patio to water the plants when I heard Mira's voice, a soft giggle, then a hushed whisper. I leaned slightly toward the edge of the house, expecting to see her alone on the phone or perhaps feeding the neighbor's cat. But she wasn't alone. I caught the tail end of a conversation, male laughter blending with hers before it quickly faded. By the time I stepped around the corner, the space was empty. Just the garden hose running and a few petals blown across the stone. Something shifted inside me. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was a quiet alarm, a pulse of confusion wrapped in concern. Who was she laughing with? Why the secrecy? As I returned inside, I glanced down the hallway. My uncle's door remained closed. He was still asleep, unaware. And so was I, mostly. But I had heard enough to sense that something deeper, perhaps darker, lay beneath the stillness of this home. And I was about to find it. The days that followed were wrapped in subtle tension, like the air before a storm, when even the birds hesitate to sing. I told myself the laughter I'd overheard could have been harmless, maybe just a phone call or an old friend dropping by. But the uncertainty clung to me, and Mira didn't make it any easier. She became more present, more intentional. She'd pause longer when we spoke, ask deeper questions, and smile in ways that lingered in my mind long after the conversation ended. It wasn't overt, but it was undeniable. There was a softness in her tone, a kind of closeness that bordered on intimate. One afternoon, we sat under the veranda as the clouds gathered. The heat had broken, and the breeze carried the scent of earth and jasmine. Mira brought out 2 cups of chamomile tea and sat across from me. "You seem quieter today," she said gently, her eyes searching mine. "I guess I'm thinking too much," I replied, half smiling. She nodded slowly. "Thinking can be dangerous when the heart is tired." There was silence then, thick and meaningful. She looked out at the swaying trees as if trying to steady herself. "You ever feel like you're walking a fine line between what's right and what feels right?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. The rain began to fall, not heavy, but steady, enough to draw us inside. The living room flickered with the glow of a single lamp, and outside the storm rolled in. My uncle, as always, had retired early to his room, leaving the house quiet but for the tapping of raindrops against the windows. We sat by the fireplace, the warmth of the flames drawing us into stillness. Mira pulled a blanket over her shoulders. then gently extended one edge toward me. I hesitated, then took it. "I used to believe love was about timing," she whispered, "but now I think it's about courage." Her hand brushed mine, not accidental, not forced. It was slow, delicate, questioning. I looked at her, and for a moment everything felt suspended. Every sound, every consequence, every rule. "I shouldn't," I murmured. "You didn't," she replied, pulling her hand back as if to protect us both from whatever line we were dangerously close to crossing. The fire crackled between us. Outside, the rain picked up, a symphony of hesitation and desire. Later that night, I lay awake, my thoughts caught in a tangle of emotion. What did Mira mean by courage? Who was the love she spoke of? I rose to get water, moving quietly through the darkened hallway. As I passed the guest rooms, I saw movement, a shadow slipping into the farthest room. Not Mira's. I froze. That room wasn't used. At least, it wasn't supposed to be. A door clicked shut. Silence followed. Something wasn't right. I felt it in my chest now, not just in my head. And I knew, beyond doubt, that this wasn't over. Morning came wrapped in uneasy stillness. I watched the sun rise through the kitchen window, steam curling from my untouched cup of tea. Mira moved around the house like any other day. Composed, attentive, radiant even. But the image of her, slipping into that room last night, had burned itself into my memory. Something didn't add up, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pulled into something I didn't fully understand. My uncle was, as usual, in his room, resting after breakfast. He trusted everyone around him, too much perhaps. Mira had laid out fresh linens, humming a quiet tune as she moved through the house like a keeper of peace, unaware that my perception of her was unraveling. That afternoon, the air grew warm and heavy. The house felt hollow, as if something essential had gone missing. I decided to step out for some air, but as I passed the back hallway, I heard laughter, muffled, intimate, and unmistakably not alone. I followed the sound, careful with each step. It led me to the far end of the house, to the storage room, normally locked, barely used. The door was slightly ajar. I didn't push it open. I didn't need to. The voices, hers and a man's, spoke volumes. My breath caught in my throat. Through the thin crack, I saw Mira standing close to someone. He wasn't a stranger. It was Daniel, a longtime family friend who visited now and then. Someone my uncle trusted deeply. They weren't just talking. There was a familiarity, a touch to his arm, a soft laugh that mirrored the one I'd heard days ago. I backed away, heart pounding, each step heavier than the last. I didn't want to see more. I didn't need more proof. The truth was cruel. In its clarity, Mira was involved with Daniel, and whatever emotional tether she'd hinted at with me had been nothing more than manipulation or confusion. Or both. Back in my room, I sat motionless, replaying every interaction, every lingering gaze, every word she'd chosen with such care. The betrayal wasn't just in what she did, it was in how effortlessly she'd drawn me in while hiding someone else entirely. It wasn't just romantic betrayal. It was the collapse of trust, of innocence. That evening, she greeted me at dinner like nothing had happened, placing a bowl in front of me with that same gentle smile. My uncle chatted idly, unaware of the storm beneath the surface. I smiled back. Barely. The silence between us grew louder than words, and I realized then, Mira wasn't just hiding something from my uncle. She was hiding something from everyone. And now I carried a truth too heavy to unsee, but the question remained, what would I do with it? That night felt colder than the rest, despite the summer air. The walls of the house, once a haven, now pressed in on me like silent witnesses to secrets too heavy to carry. I stayed in my room, the ceiling fan spinning above me, its rhythmic hum unable to quiet the turmoil in my mind. I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't ignore what I knew anymore. My uncle, kind and unsuspecting, trusted Mira with everything. And Daniel, his so-called friend, had crossed every unspoken line. But it wasn't just about their betrayal of him. It was about how I'd nearly fallen under the same spell. Mira had pulled me into her orbit, making me question my own heart, making me believe I was something special to her. The next morning, I found her alone in the garden, trimming roses like nothing had changed. The same soft smile, the same deliberate grace. She looked up when she saw me, her expression unreadable. "You didn't sleep," she said quietly. "No," I replied, my voice firm. "Neither did my conscience." Her hand froze midair. For the first time, I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes. "You heard, didn't you?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered, eyes cast down. "It started before you arrived. Daniel, we were something once, but it wasn't supposed to continue." "But it did," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You stayed. You let my uncle believe you were here for him, for the house, for peace." Tears welled in her eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were real or just another mask. "I cared for you," she said. "More than you know." "Then why did you let me believe there was something between us?" I asked, searching her face for anything genuine. "Because I was lonely," she said, her voice cracking. "Because I was foolish, and because you listened when no one else did. It should have meant something." But in the shadow of betrayal, even the sincerest confession felt empty. I walked away then, heart pounding, the garden fading behind me. I found my uncle in his study later that day. He looked up, surprised to see the seriousness in my eyes. "There's something you should know," I said slowly. But then I stopped. He looked so content, so peaceful in his ignorance. I imagined the pain he would feel. An older man who had found comfort in the company of someone he trusted. Would telling him free me or destroy him? In the end, I told him nothing. I left the next morning without a word to Mira. Some truths, I realized, aren't ours to deliver. Sometimes silence isn't cowardice, it's mercy. But the weight of what I knew never left me. Even now, I carry it. Because not every betrayal demands justice. Some just demand that you never forget.